London woke with its usual good manners, carriages clattering like well-bred thunder, a polite drizzle polishing everything it touched, and gossip served before breakfast as God intended. In the house of Westmere, however, silence had moved in, paid no rent, and rearranged the furniture. The Duchess Anne regarded her reflection the way one studies an old portrait: admirable frame, tragically curated expression. The hair, faultless. The silk, obedient. The posture, proof she could balance society's expectations and still curtsy on command. Beneath all that polish, though, lived a woman exhausted by the sport of begging for crumbs of presents. On her dressing table sat a plain parcel tied with blue twine. No sender. Anne undid the knot. Inside, a white leather notebook with a single word pressed in gold. Write. At last, she murmured. If no one will tell my story, I shall. A knock, then Lady Beatrice swept in, childhood friend, confidant, and owner of a fan that could deliver entire monologues. Tell me that's a new diary, B said. The old ones have suffered enough on our behalf. Not a diary, a project, Anne replied. Project Westmere. 30 days, 30 decisions that return me to myself. Beatrice lowered her fan. Heaven save us. Will you scandalize London or salvage it? Possibly both. The Duke of Westmere, Josh, tall, correct, and disastrously competent at everything except marriage, crossed the corridor like a handsomely made winter. He entered the morning room wearing the face of a man who has apologized 1,000 times internally, and never once out loud. Lord Ashbury has confirmed for the musicale, he announced, completely unacquainted with preamble, and the minister wishes to discuss the waterway. Splendid, Anne said without looking up. Perhaps he can also locate my husband's heart since he knows so much about channels. Josh faltered. Anne. I assume Anne is your way of saying stay while your entire being declares you are an administrative detail. A porcelain silence. He adjusted his glove. The little ritual of a man fastening armor. There are reasons, he said softly. There always are. Fascinatingly, none include the words, I feel. He nodded, an almost invisible surrender. Tonight, meet me in the conservatory. 11. At 11, the clocks in this house refuse to tick, she answered sweetly. They've been stopping just before they reach me for months. That afternoon, while London powdered its nose for the evening, Anne rummaged through her late grandfather's travel chest. She was shopping for courage and found, quite rudely, a secret. Beneath a loose lining lay a tiny compass rose key tied to a hand-sketched map of the winter garden. At the center, an X over the north glass house, in the margin a faded note. For A, when you ask the right question. A for Anne? Beatrice arched a brow. Or A for amends? A for now? Anne slipped map and key into her skirt pocket. Tonight I'm going to the X. And the Duke? If he wishes to find me, he can learn the route. Beatrice smiled, tender and dangerous. My clever girl, do not confuse strategy with revenge. One heals, the other scorches. I don't want to scorch, Anne said, resting a hand on the notebook. I want to light. Rule 1. I will not beg for crumbs. I am setting my own table. Westmere's soiree delivered London's finest specimens. Ladies with heirloom jewels and gentlemen with heirloom opinions. Music drifted like perfumed wallpaper. Conversation rustled like expensive paper doing nothing in particular. Anne crossed the room with trained grace and a new glint in her eye. Purpose. Your grace is particularly radiant, observed the Countess of Warwick, a woman who measured luminescence for sport. A new modiste? A new author, Anne said. I've begun a book. A book? On how to love without vanishing. The Countess released an O worth a 3-volume treatise. Across the room Josh watched, jaw tense. Not jealousy of the crowd, terror of losing what he had never learned to hold. At 5 to 11, Anne excused herself and slipped into the corridor of glass. The north house smelled of wet earth and old promises. The panes caught lamplight and threw it back in shy shivers. At the center, unnoticed, ever present, a squat iron cabinet with a compass rose lock. The key fit like a memory finally returning the call. No jewels inside. Letters, a neat stack bound in blue ribbon, Seals cracked, dates from years ago, each addressed to A. Westmere. The handwriting, disciplined, spare, was Josh's. Anne opened the first. If ever this silence wounds you, know that before yours there was mine. I do not write for you to read. I write because it is the only way to exist without harming you. The next lines were blurred, by water that was not from the sky. I wrote when I had no words, said his voice behind her, lower than prayer, raw as honesty's first attempt. Then I kept them, because I feared giving you everything and still failing. She turned slowly. Why did you never deliver them? He drew breath like a man unbuckling a lifetime of polished restraint. Because there was something I had to settle before they reached your hands. Something, or someone. Her tone was firm, not cruel. He shut his eyes briefly. Someone. And something. Neither worthy of you. A faint click from the back of the house. They were not alone. On the wooden bench, an envelope rested with suspicious newness. The seal bore the same compass rose. On the reverse, 2 words, not burned. Beatrice materialized at the doorway, guided by instinct and her obsession with well-timed entrances. Fan pressed to her chest. Anne, that seal, it belongs to the Blue Letter Club. She lowered her voice. The letters London swore were burned after the scandal 8 years ago. A small glacier slid down Anne's spine. Josh turned to stone. What's in those letters, Josh? She asked. Each syllable measured. He did not answer. Instead, he glanced at the conservatory clock. 10:59. The minute hand quivered. 11, he whispered. It's when everything stops. The hand clicked forward, then, like habit returning to its favorite sin, stopped. At that exact breath, light footsteps skimmed the glass corridor. A feminine silhouette paused at the door, dropped a second envelope, and vanished with the efficiency of someone who does this professionally. Anne lifted the envelope, fingers steady. Inside, a single slip. Truth was not burned. It was locked where you learned not to speak. Find me where the music always misses the last note. She looked up at Josh, who at last seemed to grasp the weight of his own silence. Where the music misses the last note? Beatrice murmured, fanning the air as if it might spell answers. Anne hugged the notebook close. The old ballroom, she said, certain. The floorboard that groans at the end of the minuet. Josh stepped forward, unarmored, finally human. If I go with you, is there still a page left for me? If you learn to write it with me, she said without blinking. From the distant salon, a fresh waltz began. The frozen clock listened as if it too wanted a second chance at time. Who delivered the not-burned letters? What did the Blue Letter Club hide during the scandal 8 years ago? And why does the old ballroom always swallow the last note, mere creak, or deliberate warning? The old Westmere ballroom was the kind of place where ghosts had assigned seating. Every mirror seemed to remember something improper, and every chandelier swayed slightly, as if still gossiping about a waltz long over. Anne entered first, her lantern cutting through the sleepy dust like a blade of truth. Beatrice followed, clutching her fan and muttering that she preferred scandals performed in daylight. Josh came last, shoulders tense, expression unreadable, though finally readable enough for Anne to notice something new. Discomfort. Progress. Good heavens, Beatrice whispered. You could serve tea to regret itself in this place. Please don't, Anne murmured. Regret never knows when to leave. The Duke gave a quiet cough. May I remind you both that we are here to do precisely what you should have done 8 years ago, Anne interrupted. Uncover the truth. Speak. And perhaps apologize in complete sentences. Beatrice's fan snapped open like a weapon. She's on fire tonight. I'm positively inspired. Josh exhaled. Then let us begin before the house develops more opinions. They approached the grand piano at the center of the room. Elegant, ebony, and hopelessly out of tune. When Anne pressed a key, a sharp note shivered through the hall, and the last one fell silent. Mid-echo. There, Anne said softly. Where the music dies. Josh knelt, brushing the floorboards near the piano's base. The board's loose. He pulled, and a panel lifted easily, revealing a hollow space filled not with dust, but letters. Dozens of them. Blue seals, identical to the one on the mysterious envelope. Beatrice gasped. "Well, I shall faint stylishly later." Anne picked one up and broke the seal. The letter's ink had bled at the edges, but the words were legible. "If you read this, it means silence failed. What we feared was never burned, merely hidden. The truth concerns 3 names. One betrayed, one vanished, one waiting still." Josh frowned. 3 names? Beatrice tilted her head. "Perhaps we should start with the one who vanished. London loves a disappearance. It gives people something polite to whisper about." Anne ignored her friend's dramatic flair and looked directly at her husband. "Josh, what happened 8 years ago?" He hesitated. Too long. The kind of hesitation that weighs more than confession itself. "There was a woman," he said finally. "A letter meant for the council. It disappeared. And with it, my credibility." Beatrice blinked. "You lost credibility? I thought that was hereditary in your family." Josh gave her a weary glare, then turned back to Anne. "Someone forged my seal. Used it to sign a decree that cost hundreds of families their homes. I was blamed, of course. The Blue Letter Club offered to destroy the proof, to burn every trace in exchange for silence. I agreed. Foolishly." Anne stared at him, the candlelight drawing soft fury across her face. "So while I waited for words, you were busy hiding sins you didn't commit. Protecting you," he said. "Or so I told myself. Protecting me from what? From shame." Beatrice sighed. "You men and your chronic heroism. Ever tried talking?" Before Anne could reply, a draft swept through the ballroom. The candles flickered. One flame bent backward, pointing toward the far corner where an old portrait hung under a veil of dust. Anne lifted the lantern closer. "Josh," she whispered. "Who is that?" The Duke's face drained of color. "That was Lady Evelyn. My sister." Beatrice froze. "Was? She died the year the letters vanished," Josh said, voice cracking. "Or at least, everyone said she did." Anne studied the portrait. The woman's painted eyes seemed almost alive, her hand resting over a sealed envelope in her lap. The seal was blue. "Oh no," Beatrice murmured. "If your sister's involved, I refuse to be left out. I've waited years for a proper Gothic mystery." Josh touched the frame gently. "If Evelyn hid these letters, she may have known who forged mine." Anne set down the lantern, her resolve sharpening like glass. "Then we're not done." Beatrice nodded solemnly. "Of course not. You've only just started to make him sweat. It would be criminal to stop now." Josh managed a rueful smile. "You find this amusing?" "My dear Duke," Beatrice said sweetly, "women have survived centuries of polite indifference. You may as well let us enjoy your panic." Anne chuckled softly, though her gaze never left the portrait. "Josh, if your sister's ghost is sending us riddles, I intend to answer them. Every last one." A soft click echoed behind the wall. Something mechanical, an old lock shifting. Then, almost theatrically, the portrait tilted forward, revealing a hidden door. Josh stepped toward it, but Anne blocked him gently with her arm. "This time," she said, voice steady, "I go first." And with that, the Duchess pushed open the secret passage, lantern raised high, disappearing into the narrow darkness where the air smelled faintly of ink, roses, and secrets that refused to stay buried. What lies beyond the hidden passage? Could Lady Evelyn truly be alive, or has someone else been writing in her name? And what truth do the blue letters still guard, waiting for Anne to read aloud to a world that loves silence more than honesty? The hidden passage groaned awake like an elderly servant who'd sworn retirement decades ago. Dust fell in polite clouds as Anne lifted her lantern higher, revealing stone walls lined not with cobwebs, but with paper. Hundreds of old letters pinned neatly along both sides as though the corridor itself were a diary that had decided to publish. Beatrice peered over Anne's shoulder, fanning herself. "Either your late relatives were breathtakingly sentimental, or this is the most well-organized haunting in London. Both are equally likely," Anne muttered. Josh followed close behind, one hand brushing the damp wall. These can't all be Evelyn's. Anne stopped and turned, her tone sugar over steel. And you would know, wouldn't you? Since communication was clearly your strong suit. He sighed. I deserve that. Yes, she said. And I've been saving it for the perfect dramatic echo. Beatrice clapped softly. Delivered flawlessly, darling. They moved deeper. The air cooled, smelling faintly of ink and wilted roses. Each letter bore a seal, the same blue compass rose, and a date. But the handwriting varied, some elegant, some hurried, some trembling. Anne stopped before one that caught her eye. It read simply, "To my brother, who mistook silence for strength." Her heart stumbled. "Josh." He stepped forward, face pale. The handwriting was undeniably Evelyn's. He broke the seal and read aloud, "You chose to bury pain beneath duty, and now duty is all you have. I am leaving because I must, not because I wish to. When truth finds you, remember, fire does not destroy letters, it reveals invisible ink." Anne blinked. "Invisible ink?" Beatrice gasped. "She's clever, I adore her already." Josh frowned, thinking. "We need a flame." Anne handed him the lantern, and as he held one of the letters to its warmth, faint writing shimmered into view like a ghost confessing. "The man who forged your seal has your handwriting, your ring, and your trust. He will destroy you from within." Beatrice's eyes widened. "Well, that's comforting." Josh stiffened. "My ring was missing for a week that year. I thought I'd misplaced it." Anne crossed her arms. "And of course you didn't mention it, because why communicate when brooding is an option?" Beatrice chuckled. "Truly, silence is the family sport." Josh ran a hand through his hair. "I think Evelyn faked her death to investigate whoever betrayed me." Anne lifted her chin. "And perhaps she left this labyrinth for us to finish what she started." Beatrice tapped a letter with her fan. "In that case, I vote we take everything that glows ominously and see what explodes first." They collected a few letters glowing faintly under the heat, placing them carefully into Anne's notebook. At the far end of the corridor stood a small iron door, half hidden by ivy and dust. Etched above it were the Latin words veritas in silentio, truth in silence. Anne smiled wryly. "Well, that's practically your family motto, isn't it?" Josh exhaled through a laugh. "It would seem so." She touched the door handle, cold, ornate, shaped like another compass rose. "It's locked." Beatrice leaned in, squinting. "Or, it's waiting." Anne frowned. "Waiting for what?" "Perhaps," Beatrice said with a knowing grin, "for a duchess brave enough to open it without asking permission." Anne tilted her head, then pulled out the small key she'd found days earlier, the one marked with the same rose emblem. It fit perfectly. The lock turned with a satisfying click, and a soft light seeped from within. They entered a circular room lined with mirrors. In the center stood a wooden pedestal, holding a single sealed envelope tied in black ribbon. On its face, written in graceful script, "For A and J, together." Beatrice inhaled sharply. How romantic, and possibly cursed. Anne approached cautiously, fingers hovering over the letter. "It's her handwriting again." Josh nodded, voice tight. "Go on." She untied the ribbon and unfolded the page. "If you have found this, then one of you finally stopped running. The truth was never meant to destroy you, only to test if you were still willing to listen. The forger hides behind a familiar smile, one you still invite to dinner." Anne froze. Beatrice stopped fanning. Josh whispered, "Good God." From somewhere above them came the faint creak of a floorboard. Deliberate, heavy, alive. Beatrice mouthed, "We're not alone." Anne turned off the lantern. Silence. Then, another step. Josh reached for her hand, the first time in months, and she didn't pull away. A shadow moved against the far mirror, tall, confident. A man's voice drifted down, smooth as honey and twice as dangerous. "Well, well," it said. "Seems my sister's ghost finally delivered the mail." Anne's eyes widened. Sister's ghost? The figure stepped into the light. It was Lord Edmund Hawthorne, Josh's oldest friend, and on his hand gleamed a signet ring identical to the Duke's. "Why does Edmund have the Duke's ring?" And what really happened 8 years ago? Could Evelyn still be alive, hiding behind the Blue Letter Club's shadow? And will Anne trust her husband long enough to uncover the truth, or will she write her own ending first? For a full 10 seconds, the three of them simply stared. Anne's lantern flickered in her trembling hand. Josh's jaw tightened as if regret were something that could be clenched away. And Beatrice whispered, very helpfully, "Well, this is awkward." Lord Edmund Hawthorne stepped into the circle of light as though the room had been built for his entrance, which, knowing Edmund, it probably had been. His smile was easy, too polished, the kind men practiced in mirrors and used only when lying. "Josh," he said pleasantly, as though they'd met for afternoon tea and not in a secret chamber of ancestral guilt. "You've aged well. Marriage suits you. Does it speak?" Anne's eyes narrowed. "It writes, actually." "Ah," Edmund replied, his gaze sweeping to her notebook. "So you've decided to chronicle your misfortunes? Excellent. History loves a tragic duchess." Beatrice snapped her fan shut like a pistol. "And history loves a villain with witty lines. Congratulations, you're halfway there." Josh's voice was low, brittle. "You kept my ring." Edmund turned his hand, admiring the signet as if it were an accessory rather than evidence. "It seemed a shame to waste good craftsmanship. You dropped it during one of your heroics 8 years ago. I picked it up, you never asked." "I trusted you," Josh said. "Exactly my point," Edmund replied smoothly. "Trust, the cheapest currency in London." Anne's pulse hammered. "You forged his seal." He smiled. "Oh, come now. Such an ugly word. Forged. I prefer repurposed." Beatrice crossed her arms. "I prefer arrested, but here we are." Josh took a step forward. "Why, Edmund?" The man shrugged, the picture of lazy grace. "Because while you were busy being noble, I was busy being practical. The land deal, the council, the missing letter, all for the good of England naturally. And if I profited along the way, well, patriotism takes many forms." Anne's voice cut the air clean. "And my sister-in-law, Evelyn?" For the first time, Edmund hesitated. "Ah, the inconvenient one," he said finally. "She discovered my little enterprise, too curious for her own good, so I helped her disappear." Beatrice's fan clattered to the floor. "You what?" Edmund smiled, thin and cruel. "Relax. I didn't kill her if that's what you're imagining. I simply gave her a story convincing enough that everyone stopped asking questions. A fire, some ashes, a closed coffin." She seemed relieved. Anne's voice shook with fury. "Where is she?" "Alive. Somewhere she can't hurt anyone, especially your husband. Consider it my act of friendship." Josh lunged forward, but Anne caught his arm. "No," she said. "Not yet." Her tone made him pause. He'd never heard her sound so calm, the calm of a storm that knows it will win. Anne took a slow step toward Edmund. "You've spent years manipulating silence. Clever men always do. But silence isn't your ally anymore. It's mine." He tilted his head. "Oh? Planning to lecture me to death?" "Not at all." She held up one of the blue-sealed letters, edges glowing faintly in the lantern light. "I plan to publish you." For the first time, Edmund's smile faltered. "You wouldn't dare." "She absolutely would," Beatrice said. "She once wrote a 5-page letter to her modiste about uneven stitching. This will be glorious." Anne continued, voice sharp and beautiful. "You see, the Duchess of Westmere may be invisible at home, but London loves a scandal. And you, Lord Hawthorne, are about to become one." Edmund's eyes flicked to Josh. "You'll let her ruin your reputation?" Josh finally met Anne's gaze, and for the first time in years his eyes held something real. "If it means truth, yes. I'm done being silent." Anne smiled faintly. "Good. I was growing tired of monologues." From somewhere deep in the manor, a bell chimed. Midnight. Edmund flinched, a flash of real unease breaking his mask. "What is it?" Beatrice asked, sensing the change. Edmund's voice dropped. "That bell shouldn't ring. Not anymore." Anne frowned. "Why?" "Because," he said, stepping back toward the shadows. "It means she's awake." "The sister?" Beatrice gasped. Edmund nodded slowly. Evelyn was clever enough to survive me, but she wasn't kind enough to forgive me. Then, a cold wind, a slam of doors, and the sound of the old piano above them playing a single note. The last one, the one that had always refused to sound before. Anne's lantern flickered violently, throwing wild shadows across the mirrors, and in one of them, for just a heartbeat, a woman's reflection appeared. Pale, calm, holding a quill. And then she whispered, clear as daylight, "Finish what I started." Anne gasped. "Josh, did you—" "I saw her." Beatrice clutched her pearls. "Well, I officially regret coming without wine." The flames steadied. The mirror now showed only their own stunned faces. Anne swallowed hard. "Then it's true. Evelyn's alive." Josh shook his head. "Or something that remembers her is." Edmund was already backing toward the door. "You want truth, Anne? Find her first. Before she finds me." He vanished into the darkness. Beatrice picked up her fan with a nervous laugh. "I must say, your family gatherings are far more entertaining than mine." Anne turned to Josh, her voice trembling but resolute. "Then we find her. Tonight." He nodded. "Together." She looked at him, really looked. And for the first time in years, the space between them felt less like absence and more like possibility. Who, or what, awakened when the midnight bell rang? Could Evelyn truly be alive, orchestrating justice from the shadows? And can Anne and Josh trust each other enough to face a truth that might rewrite both their past and their marriage? The manor had always creaked at night, but after that bell rang, every sound felt intentional. The wind in the hallways no longer whispered. It listened. Anne and Josh stood at the foot of the grand staircase, the silence between them so thick it could have been taxed by Parliament. Beatrice, of course, refused to let gravity win for long. "Well," she said, adjusting her shawl, "either your sister has returned from the dead, or your house has developed an admirable sense of drama." Anne glanced up the stairs. Evelyn wasn't one for theatrics. She liked logic, patterns, puzzles. Josh nodded slowly. "If she's behind this, she's leading us somewhere. Evelyn never did anything without a reason." Beatrice sighed. "Ah yes, the family trait. Except for marrying badly." "Beatrice," Anne hissed. "Oh, forgive me, darling. I meant it historically." They reached the landing where portraits watched in judgment. One frame, Evelyn's, was missing. Only the pale rectangle of clean wallpaper remained. "She took her own painting," Anne murmured. Josh frowned. "Or someone took it for her." Beatrice tapped her fan thoughtfully. "Either way, she's clearly redecorating from beyond the grave." They followed the faint scent of smoke, roses and something metallic, toward the west wing. A faint flicker glowed under a door. Anne pushed it open. Inside was Evelyn's old study. The air shimmered with dust motes and candlelight. On the desk lay another sealed letter, and beside it, a stack of burned papers that somehow hadn't turned to ash. Anne leaned closer. "How is that possible?" Beatrice squinted. "Perhaps ghost insurance?" Josh picked up a charred page. "It's written with some kind of metallic ink. It resists fire." Anne unfolded the unburned letter. The wax seal bore Evelyn's crest, a silver quill crossing a rose. Inside, "If you're reading this, it means my plan succeeded, or it's all gone terribly wrong. The Blue Letter Club began as protection, but someone twisted it into a weapon. Edmund was the first, but not the only one. I left clues in ink that refuses to burn so truth could survive fire. Find the rest before they do." Josh looked up. "Before who does?" The room answered for her. A sudden crash from the corridor. Anne spun, candle trembling. Shadows shifted under the door. "Beatrice," she whispered, "did you lock the door behind us?" "Of course I didn't. I'm not the one who believes in haunted sisters." The handle turned slowly. Josh moved in front of them, but Anne noticed something glinting under the rug. A small brass lever. Without hesitation, she kicked it. The floor opened beneath their feet. All three screamed. "Well," Beatrice screamed loudest, as they slid down a hidden chute lined with velvet and indignity, landing in a narrow tunnel. Beatrice groaned. "Remind me to stop visiting you, Anne. Your home is exhausting." Josh blinked, dazed. Where are we? Anne lit her lantern. The walls here were stone again, etched with faint markings, Latin inscriptions, blue wax symbols. And further ahead, faint candlelight. They followed the glow until the tunnel opened into an underground library. Shelves upon shelves of scrolls and letters sealed in blue. At the center stood a figure cloaked in gray, her back turned. Anne froze. The air smelled again of roses and metal. Josh whispered, "Evelyn?" The woman turned. She looked older, yes. A face lined not by time but by consequence. Her eyes were sharp, bright as winter stars, and her lips curved into something like both sorrow and pride. "Hello, brother," she said softly. "I warned you not to trust Edmund." Beatrice let out a strangled noise. "I take it back. Do marry into this family, they're fascinating." Josh stumbled forward. "You're alive." Evelyn nodded. "Barely. But alive is enough." Anne stepped closer, voice trembling. "You faked your death to expose the club?" Evelyn's eyes met hers. "To save you both." The blue letters were meant to protect those accused unjustly, like Josh. But Edmund turned them into blackmail. He kept proof of every scandal, every secret, ready to ruin anyone for a price. Anne's stomach nodded. "So he forged Josh's seal to gain control." "Exactly," Evelyn said. "But when I tried to expose him, he used me as the final scandal. Claimed I'd run away with a fortune. Burned my memory along with my name." Beatrice sniffed. "Typical man. Burns everything except his own guilt." Josh looked stricken. "Evelyn, if I had known—" She cut him off gently. "You wouldn't have. You were too busy hiding from your own grief." Anne flinched at that, because it was true of them both. Then Evelyn stepped forward, placing a hand on Anne's shoulder. "But you, Duchess, you did what I couldn't. You made him listen." Anne blinked, surprised. "I only wanted him to see me." "Exactly," Evelyn said. "And that's what the world needs. People willing to be seen even when it hurts." Before Anne could answer, a loud clang echoed behind them. Evelyn's face hardened. "They've found the tunnel." "Who?" Josh demanded. Evelyn drew a small pistol from her cloak. Elegant, practical, terrifying. "Edmund's men, the blue-letter loyalists. We need to go. Now." Beatrice gasped. "You have henchmen chasing you?" "Oh, I've waited my entire life for this sort of evening." Anne grabbed the stack of surviving letters. "Where do we go?" Evelyn pointed toward a second passage. "The greenhouse. There's a door behind the fountain. Burn nothing. Read everything. And when this is over—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "Tell the truth even if it ruins us." Josh hesitated. "Evelyn, come with us." "I can't. Someone has to close this place for good." Before he could protest, she shoved him toward the exit, pulling a lever. The wall sealed shut between them. Beatrice exhaled shakily. "Well, she's definitely related to you." Anne clutched the letters to her chest. "We have to trust her." From the other side of the wall came the faint sound of footsteps. Then gunfire. Josh's voice was rough. "She's buying us time." Anne's jaw tightened. "Then we make it worth something." Will Evelyn survive her final confrontation with Edmund's men? What hidden truths lie within the unburned letters? And could one of them destroy Josh's name forever? As Anne and Josh flee through the dark greenhouse, every secret threatens to turn love, loyalty, and redemption into a dangerous gamble for their future. The night air hit them like cold silk when they burst into the greenhouse. Moonlight spilled through the glass roof, fractured by vines that had long since claimed their kingdom. Somewhere behind them, the echo of gunfire still hummed through the stone like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Anne stumbled, clutching the bundle of blue-sealed letters to her chest. Josh caught her arm before she fell, and for a brief, wild second, they looked like partners again, not just by title, but by instinct. Beatrice, however, was less poetic. "If we survive this," she panted, "I demand tea, cake, and an apology from every man involved." "Consider it decreed," Anne said, breathless. "Now hush and move." They pushed through the foliage until they reached the fountain at the far end. It was marble, carved with roses and cherubs. long dry, except for a faint glimmer of water bubbling from its center. Anne's lantern light caught on something metallic inside the basin. Josh leaned closer. A lock. Of course, Anne said, because every part of this family requires a riddle before breakfast. He smiled faintly. I'm starting to admire your sarcasm, and I'm starting to regret teaching you to notice it. Beatrice squatted beside them, fanning herself dramatically. If this leads to another hidden tunnel, I'm demanding hazard pay. Josh pried open the small compartment. Inside lay an envelope sealed with Evelyn's crest and a brass key. The letter read, "If you reach this place, then I've done my part. What you hold is the key to the real archive, the letters Edmund never found. Take them to the old cathedral. There, beneath the organ, lies the vault. Tell the priest my name, and he will help you. Trust only those who still listen before they speak." Anne exhaled, folding the letter with care. She planned everything. Beatrice straightened. Your sister-in-law may be a fugitive, but she's annoyingly efficient. I like her. Josh's expression darkened. We have to get to the cathedral before Edmund does. As if summoned by name, a shadow moved beyond the glass. Anne froze. Did you hear? The glass shattered. Bullets tore through the vines. Glass shards rained like glittering hail. Beatrice shrieked and ducked behind a pot of ferns that had absolutely no business being that dramatic. Down! Josh grabbed Anne, pulling her behind a stone bench. The sound of boots echoed. Edmund's men, at least 3 of them, their torches sweeping the greenery. Anne's mind raced. They couldn't fight. Not with Beatrice, not with the letters. But she remembered something Evelyn had written. Fire reveals invisible ink. She looked up. The greenhouse was filled with old oil lamps, still connected by thin copper piping. Josh, she whispered, how do you feel about lighting up the truth? He glanced at her. You're terrifyingly calm right now. It's the rage. It steadies me. She motioned to Beatrice. When I say run, run. Beatrice peeked up from the ferns. Oh, wonderful. The part where we die creatively. Anne grabbed one of the glass lamps and smashed it against the floor. The oil spread fast. She struck the flint on Josh's lantern. A spark jumped, and the world ignited. Flames rolled up the vines, racing across the copper lines, blooming like furious roses. The gunman shouted, retreating as heat and smoke filled the air. Anne didn't look back. Now, Beatrice! They sprinted through the rear door as the greenhouse exploded in a blaze of orange light. The flames licked at the glass ceiling, illuminating the night like the world's most scandalous sunrise. They reached the stables, panting. Horses neighed nervously. Anne still clutched the key and the surviving letters. Josh turned to her, soot streaking his face. You just burned half my property. She smirked. You're welcome. Consider it a cleansing. Beatrice coughed. Can we discuss redemption after we're not shot at? Josh helped them mount the carriage. To the cathedral, he ordered the driver, and quickly. As the carriage jolted forward, Anne looked back one last time. The manor loomed behind them. Flames reflected in every window, a phoenix of secrets burning itself clean. She whispered, Hold on, Evelyn. Josh's hand brushed hers. He didn't pull away this time. For a few moments, the only sound was the rhythm of hooves on cobblestone. Then Beatrice, ever incapable of silence, sighed. Well, she said, if we die, at least we'll be fashionably illuminated. Anne laughed softly, her first real laugh in months. If we die, I'm haunting you first. Josh smiled faintly at the road ahead. You already do. The carriage turned the final corner, revealing St. Wenton's Cathedral. Vast, ancient, its stained glass glowing in the moonlight. Anne's breath caught. It looks alive. Beatrice fanned herself. Everything tonight looks alive, dear, including my panic. Josh handed Anne the key. Your turn, Duchess. She smiled, the firelight still in her eyes. Let's finish her story. As they approached the cathedral steps, the great bell tolled once, deep, mournful, and familiar. Anne froze. That sound. Josh looked at her. Evelyn's bell. And then from the open door a voice drifted through the darkness, smooth, low, unmistakable. Arriving so soon? Edmund Hawthorne stood in the doorway, shadowed against the altar's light. He was smiling again. But this time, there was blood on his sleeve. Who bled inside the cathedral? Edmund or Evelyn? What truth hides beneath the organ vault, and why did Evelyn trust the church with her secrets? As Anne faces Edmund's twisted charm and Josh's buried guilt, the next revelation will decide not only their marriage, but who survives the final confession. The cathedral loomed like judgment itself, cold, magnificent, and absolutely unsympathetic to anyone arriving past midnight. Anne stepped inside first, her boots clicking over marble worn smooth by centuries of whispered prayers and unspoken sins. Beatrice followed, muttering something about preferring ghosts to men with egos, while Josh moved behind them, silent but ready, the kind of ready that comes from guilt, not courage. And Edmund looked as though he'd been waiting for this scene his entire life. He leaned lazily against a pew, blood seeping through the sleeve of his immaculate coat. "You took your time," he said, voice smooth but tight with pain. "I was beginning to think you'd lost your sense of adventure." Anne's eyes narrowed. "You seem rather cheerful for someone who's bleeding." Edmund smiled, thin and sharp. "Occupational hazard. Evelyn doesn't miss." Josh stiffened. "You saw her?" "Briefly," Edmund said. "Right before she shot me for old time's sake. She's probably still in the tunnels beneath us playing martyr with her little revolution." He pressed a hand to his arm, smearing blood across the marble. "Touching, really. A family reunion with firearms." Beatrice folded her arms. "Well, she's certainly the more likable sibling." Anne's tone turned icy. "Where is she?" Edmund gestured toward the altar. "Below. But the entrance only opens with the key she gave you. She always did love riddles. And she always preferred you, Duchess. You were the one who asked questions." Anne took a step forward, fire in her eyes. "Then answer one. Why destroy her work? Why betray the one person who trusted you?" His smile faded. "Because power doesn't survive on honesty, Your Grace. It survives on silence. Then it's time you discovered what happens when silence ends." Josh reached for his revolver, but Anne lifted her hand. No violence yet. Not her way. Instead, she approached the altar. The marble was carved with angels holding scrolls, each engraved with a Latin word. Veritas, Misericordia, Iustitia. She traced the letters until her finger found a small indentation in the shape of a rose. "The key," she whispered. Josh handed it to her. The brass slid perfectly into place, turning with a deep, metallic sigh. The floor shuddered, once, twice, and then part of the altar split open, revealing a narrow spiral staircase descending into darkness. Anne looked back at Edmund. "Coming?" He laughed softly. "I'll pass. Stairs and blood loss. Poor combination." Beatrice rolled her eyes. "Cowardice looks dreadful on you." Anne descended first, her lantern throwing trembling light down the spiral. The air grew cooler, thick with the scent of damp stone and candle wax. Josh followed, one hand brushing the wall, the other near his weapon. Beatrice naturally complained the entire way down. At the bottom waited a chamber unlike anything Anne had seen, a library carved into the earth itself. Hundreds of letters lay stacked in glass cases, each sealed with blue wax. In the center, a simple wooden table held an open journal, a quill, and a candle still burning. Evelyn sat beside it, pale, calm, alive. Anne's breath caught. "You're hurt." Evelyn looked up, blood staining her shoulder but her smile steady. "Not fatally. Edmund's worse off." "That's some comfort." Josh exhaled a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "You should have told me." "I did," Evelyn said softly. "You just stopped listening." Anne's chest tightened. She knew that tone, the one used by women who had tried too long to be heard. Evelyn gestured toward the table. "The blue letters are all here. The real ones. Every confession, every forgery, every truth silenced by men like Edmund. If we release them, London will burn." Beatrice, wiping dust from her skirt, perked up. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Josh frowned. "We can't. Too many innocent names. Too much chaos." Anne looked between them. The Duke afraid of scandal, the sister hungry for justice, the friend already picking out teacups for the apocalypse. Then she stepped forward. No one said we had to burn London. Just the lies. Evelyn's eyes met hers. Wary. Curious. Explain. Anne opened her notebook. We publish the truth selectively. The proof that clears your name and Josh's. We destroy the rest. Not by fire, but by confession. We tell the story ourselves before Edmund can twist it. We let the world see what silence costs. Josh hesitated. You'd risk your reputation? Anne smiled faintly. Reputation is a costume. I'm tired of dressing up. Beatrice wiped her eyes discreetly. Well, I didn't bring champagne, but this will do. Evelyn looked at her brother. You'd stand beside her. Josh took Anne's hand. Firm. Certain. For once, I'll speak instead of assuming she knows. A slow, emotional silence filled the room, the kind that didn't need grand speeches to mean something. Then, footsteps above. Loud. Angry. Edmund's voice echoed down the staircase. Beautiful idea, Duchess. Let's see how far honesty gets you when you're dead. Gunshots cracked, ricocheting off stone. Evelyn ducked behind a column, firing back. Josh pushed Anne toward cover. Beatrice screamed something heroic but mostly unprintable. Anne clutched her notebook to her chest. And that's when she saw it. The candle's flame trembling over a single line written in Evelyn's open journal. If truth must survive, let it live through her pen. Anne grabbed the journal and the letters, shoving them into her satchel. She turned to Evelyn. We finish this together, above ground. Evelyn nodded, grimacing as she stood. Let's go write our ending. They climbed the stairs, smoke and gunfire chasing them. At the top, Edmund staggered against the altar, pistol raised, blood dripping onto marble. Stay where you are, he snarled. You don't understand what you're playing with. Anne stepped forward anyway, notebook in hand. You're right, Edmund. I don't play with power. I rewrite it. And before he could fire, Beatrice, God bless her, swung her fan like a saber and smacked him square across the face. The pistol flew. The shot went wide. Josh lunged, knocking Edmund back against the pews. The Duke's punch was silent, efficient, devastating. When it was over, Edmund lay unconscious at the base of the altar, a fallen idol of his own arrogance. Beatrice blinked, astonished. Did I just save the day with accessorizing? Anne laughed, shaky but sincere. You always do. Evelyn sank to the floor, exhausted. So, what now? Anne looked at the letters, then at her husband. Now we tell the truth, every word that matters. And as dawn filtered through the stained glass, painting them in colors of redemption, the Duchess of Westmere opened her notebook to a clean page. With Edmund defeated but alive, can Anne and Josh truly free themselves from the Blue Letter Club's influence? When London awakens to their scandalous confession, how far will society go to silence a woman who dares to write her own story, and a duke who finally learns to speak? By sunrise, London had done what London did best, turn someone's tragedy into breakfast conversation. Tea was poured, curtains were twitched, and half the city whispered the same phrase. Did you hear what the Duchess wrote? Because Anne of Westmere had, indeed, written. She'd sent Evelyn's journal and the selected blue letters to 3 newspapers at dawn, each carrying the same message. When silence is a crime, confession is a revolution. At Westmere House, chaos reigned with elegance. Servants ran like polite lightning. Couriers came and went, carrying sealed envelopes. The Duke's butler was pale enough to be mistaken for decor. Beatrice, meanwhile, sat in the drawing room eating scones with the calm of a woman who'd survived both bullets and boredom. Your little essay has set fire to half the ton, she said cheerfully. Lady Warwick reportedly fainted, though to be fair, she'll faint if her tea is too hot. Anne poured herself coffee, strong, unsweetened, uncompromising. Good, let them talk. Words can't kill you unless you swallow them. Josh entered then, his usual poise replaced by something new. Honesty. His cravat was missing, his hair rebelliously human, and his expression softer than morning light. The papers are already printing, he said quietly. Evelyn's name cleared. Mine too. Anne met his eyes. And yours? He smiled faintly. Mine is finally mine again. Beatrice looked between them, a smirk curling. Ah, reconciliation brewing. I'll just take my breakfast elsewhere. I dislike being shot and third-wheeled. Stay, Anne said. You earned the front row seat. Josh stepped closer, his voice low. You've turned my entire world upside down, Anne. She tilted her head. Oh? I thought it was already sideways. He chuckled. Fair. But I'd like to keep it this way, messy, honest, alive. Her heart skipped. That's the first romantic thing you've said since our wedding. Then perhaps I should start again. Before she could reply, the butler entered, wringing his hands. Your Graces. There's a visitor. Anne raised a brow. At this hour? A soft, confident voice came from the doorway. Surely I've earned an invitation to breakfast. Evelyn stood there, cloaked, pale but smiling. The bandage at her shoulder was fresh, her posture unbroken. Beatrice leapt to her feet. By all that is dramatic, you're alive again. Evelyn laughed. It's becoming a habit. Josh embraced her, something unspoken mending between them. London knows the truth now. You can come home. Evelyn shook her head. Home isn't the same after secrets, but at least I can walk freely in the daylight. Anne nodded. Then walk tall. You've earned it. Evelyn's gaze softened. As have you, Duchess. You reminded London that silence isn't virtue. It's surrender. Beatrice dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Well, I for one am thrilled to be associated with a scandal that doesn't involve gambling or fainting. Evelyn smiled knowingly. Don't speak too soon. The ton loves a redemption arc almost as much as it loves tearing one apart. A knock interrupted them. The butler returned, pale as parchment. A message from the London Herald, madam. They request your statement. Immediately. Anne took the note, reading aloud. The Duchess of Westmere is invited to speak at the Royal Press Assembly regarding her letters of truth. The city demands to know what she will write next. Beatrice gasped. You're a literary celebrity. Imagine the hats we'll need. Josh's hand brushed Anne's. You don't have to face them. We could disappear, start somewhere new. Anne smiled softly. And let them write the ending for me? No, my love. I'm not done telling the truth. Evelyn nodded. Then you won't go alone. The Blue Letter Club is finished, but its shadow isn't. Someone must protect what we rebuilt. Anne looked at both of them. The brother who'd learned to speak, the sister who'd learned to survive, and felt something shift in her chest. Not pride, not rebellion. Peace. Then it's settled, she said. We'll go together. By afternoon, carriages lined the streets outside the Royal Press Hall. Nobles, reporters, and opportunists filled the square, buzzing with anticipation. Anne stepped out first, dressed in ivory and emerald. Not to dazzle, but to be unmistakably herself. Josh followed, Evelyn at her side and Beatrice behind them whispering, If anyone boos, I'm throwing a canapé. The crowd parted like a tide as Anne reached the podium. Cameras clicked, pens hovered. She opened her notebook. London, she began, her voice clear and sure, has long taught its women to smile in silence. But silence is not grace. It is the graveyard of truth. A murmur rippled through the audience. She continued, stronger now. We were told to burn letters, hide feelings, and call it dignity. But we forget. Fire doesn't destroy truth. It only makes the ink harder to ignore. Josh watched her with something that looked suspiciously like awe. Evelyn stood beside him, chin high. Anne turned one final page and smiled. I am the Duchess who was tired of indifference, and I wrote my own story. Perhaps it's time London did the same. The hall erupted. Applause, outrage, admiration, scandal. The city had found its new obsession. And Anne, the woman who had once been invisible beside her husband, had become something far rarer. Heard. She stepped down from the stage, meeting Josh's eyes. So, she said lightly, how does it feel being married to infamy? He grinned. Like breathing again. Beatrice sighed dreamily. Well, that's it. You're officially my favorite couple. And I say that as someone who once dated a poet and a pirate. Evelyn laughed softly. London may never forgive us. Anne looked toward the crowd. Chaotic, divided, alive. Then let them talk, she said. We're finally worth the words. As London crowns Anne both scandal and savior, new letters surface, unsigned, unsealed, written in her own handwriting. Who is mimicking the Duchess of Westmere's words? And will the truth she fought to reveal become the very weapon that brings her down? By the next sunrise, the Duchess of Westmere had achieved something no woman in recent memory had managed. She'd terrified Parliament, confused the clergy, and become a trending topic at every breakfast table from Mayfair to the docks. Anne woke to find herself on the front page. Again. The Duchess of Westmere speaks, and London listens. Beatrice burst into the room without knocking, holding 3 newspapers and a grin far too enthusiastic for morning. Darling, congratulations. You're officially more scandalous than gin before noon. Anne, half asleep and entirely unimpressed, muttered, Is that meant to be comforting? Utterly, Beatrice said. Scandal sells. Besides, your portrait looks divine. They caught your I'm done with everyone's nonsense face perfectly. Josh entered then, freshly shaven and holding coffee like a man hoping caffeine might fix reputation damage. They're already calling you the Duchess of Truth. The House of Lords is furious. Anne smirked. Then I must be doing something right. But before Beatrice could make another cheerful remark, the butler appeared in the doorway, pale and trembling. Never a good sign. Your Grace, he stammered. Delivery. Left at the door. No name, no courier, just this. He held out a small wooden box tied with navy ribbon. Anne frowned. Set it on the desk. Josh's instincts flared. He moved beside her. Anne, don't. But curiosity, as usual, outran caution. She untied the ribbon and opened the box. Inside was a neat stack of letters. Parchment, blue wax seals, and a single note on top in her own handwriting. The truth is never finished. Continue what I began. Beatrice blinked. You've been sending yourself mail now? Delightfully eccentric. Anne's pulse quickened. I didn't write this. Josh examined one of the seals. They're perfect imitations. Beatrice shivered. So, someone is forging the Duchess of Westmere now? How very fashionable. Anne opened one letter carefully. The words were precise, the style eerily familiar, her phrasing, her tone, even the way she looped her Y's. But the message, those who applaud her do not yet know what she destroyed to speak. Ask the Duke what price he paid for silence. Josh stiffened. Anne. She looked up sharply. What is that supposed to mean? He hesitated. There's something I never told you. About the night Evelyn vanished. Beatrice groaned. Oh, splendid. Nothing like emotional bombshells before breakfast. Anne crossed her arms. Speak, Your Grace. Before my imagination writes something worse. Josh took a deep breath. When Edmund first blackmailed me, he didn't just forge documents. He threatened to expose something personal. Something I did out of fear. Anne's jaw tightened. Go on. I signed a statement declaring Evelyn unstable, he said quietly. To protect the estate, I let them commit her to a private sanatorium for a week. She escaped before they could silence her for good. I've lived with that ever since. Anne stared at him. Hurt, disbelief, fury all tangled together. You locked her away to keep your name clean. I thought I was protecting her. I was wrong, Beatrice muttered. Congratulations, you've just upgraded from tragic husband to full Shakespearean disaster. Anne's voice dropped to a whisper. And now someone knows. Josh nodded grimly. Someone who wants to finish what Edmund started. Evelyn entered then, cloaked and pale from her injuries. They already have. She held up another letter, delivered separately, bearing the same handwriting. It was on my doorstep. Addressed to me. Anne read the first line aloud. Your sister may have survived the fire, but the ashes still speak. Beatrice looked around nervously. Lovely. We've gone from scandal to haunting again. Full circle. Evelyn frowned. The handwriting. It's perfect. Even the ink tone. Whoever's behind this has access to my materials. And Anne's. Josh met her gaze. You think it's someone from inside the club? Evelyn shook her head. No, the club's finished. This feels Personal. Anne sat slowly, mind racing. Who else would benefit from tearing us apart? From making the world doubt the very truth we risked everything to tell? Beatrice gasped suddenly. The answer is obvious. Everyone turned. She beamed. Someone jealous, heartbroken, and dramatically unhinged. In other words, an ex-lover. Josh groaned. Beatrice, not everything is a romantic tragedy. Beatrice shrugged. Please, in this family, everything is a romantic tragedy. But Evelyn's expression changed, sharp, alert. Wait. There was someone, one of the club's scribes, a woman named Clara Haraway, brilliant linguist, obsessed with truth, and utterly furious when I shut down her proposal to expand the club's influence. Anne frowned. So she knows all our styles, all our secrets. And, Evelyn added grimly, she's an excellent forger. Beatrice leaned in. So our mystery villain is a rejected genius with a flair for drama? I adore her already. Josh ignored her. Then where would she strike next? Evelyn hesitated. If she's rewriting the story, she'll go where the next chapter is being written, the Royal Press Hall. Anne's blood ran cold. She's going after the journalists, the ones printing our statements. Beatrice gasped. How terribly poetic. Also terrifying. Josh turned to Anne, his voice urgent. We need to get there before she does. Anne gathered the forged letters in Evelyn's note, tucking them into her satchel. No, she said firmly. I need to get there. This started with my words. It ends with them too. Evelyn grasped her hand. Then take me with you. She's dangerous. Beatrice straightened her hat. And me. Someone has to provide sarcastic commentary during mortal peril. Josh sighed, defeated. Then all of us. Anne looked toward the window. Outside, London glimmered. Elegant, deceitful, alive. Somewhere out there, a woman was rewriting her story with the same pen. Anne smiled grimly. Let her try. She's not the only one who knows how to make ink bleed. Who is Clara Haraway really? A rival writer, a ghost from Evelyn's past, or something far closer to Anne herself? When truth becomes indistinguishable from imitation, will the Duchess of Westmere lose her story, or prove once and for all that no one else can write her ending? The Royal Press Hall had never seen so much excitement, or so much danger. The street outside was packed with carriages, gossip, and the intoxicating scent of freshly printed ink. Inside, typewriters clattered like gunfire, and journalists scurried through the corridors, hungry for headlines. Anne, Evelyn, Josh, and Beatrice slipped through the main entrance under a flurry of whispers. Reporters turned their heads, pens paused mid-sentence. The Duchess of Truth had returned, and London knew it. Beatrice whispered, Darling, this is thrilling. If I die, make sure my eulogy mentions how stunning I looked. Anne didn't answer. Her eyes scanned the hall, chandeliers glinting, banners hanging, and in the far corner, a printing press still warm from the morning edition. Every instinct told her Clara Haraway was here. Evelyn touched her arm. She'll want an audience. She'll want you to see it. Anne nodded. Then we give her one. They reached the editorial chamber, a grand room filled with desks, stacks of paper, and one very startled editor. My lady, he began, half bowing, half fainting. Save the courtesies, Anne said. Where are today's drafts? He gestured toward the desk near the window. There, but I swear I never authorized. Anne froze. Spread across the table were dozens of printed sheets. Her words. At least, words that looked like hers. The Duchess confesses. Truth is a performance. She admits to fabricating the blue letters. A scandal greater than any before, written by her own hand. Each line was crafted with eerie precision, her phrasing, her rhythm, even her tone of righteous defiance twisted into something hollow and cruel. Beatrice whispered, horrified. She's rewriting your revolution into a confession. Evelyn clenched her jaw. And she's using the presses to make it official. Josh turned to the editor. Who brought these? The man stammered. A woman. Said she came from your household. Dark coat, sharp tongue. Anne's pulse quickened. Where is she now? As if summoned, a soft voice drifted from behind the presses. Still here? It said. Clara Haraway stepped into view, young, graceful, eyes alight with genius and fury. Ink stained her fingertips. A pistol glinted at her hip. I must say, she began, seeing you in person is disappointing. I expected a monster, not a martyr in lace. Anne faced her. And I expected a writer, not a thief. Clara smiled faintly. You stole first? I founded the Blue Letter Club to expose corruption. You turned it into redemption fiction. You made London feel, instead of think. I'm merely restoring balance. Evelyn stepped forward. You forged my brother's ruin, Clara. You almost cost lives. Clara's gaze flicked to her. And you cost me everything. You disbanded my work, burned my reputation. Tell me, how does it feel to live off the ashes of better minds? Beatrice, ever unfiltered, muttered. If this turns into a feminist manifesto with bullets. I'm leaving. Clara ignored her, pulling a single folded sheet from her pocket. This is tomorrow's headline, my masterpiece, your downfall. She read aloud. The Duchess of Westmere confesses, I wrote lies for love. Anne's stomach dropped. Clara continued, eyes glittering. One push of a lever and every paper in London will print it by dawn. Josh moved subtly, stepping closer. You don't have to do this. Oh, but I do, Clara said softly. Because you and your wife taught London that words can save lives. I intend to prove they can end them too. She reached for the press lever, and Anne hurled her notebook. The leather cover struck Clara's wrist, sending the pistol clattering to the floor. Evelyn kicked it aside. Josh lunged, grabbing Clara's arm. The two struggled, knocking over stacks of paper and scattering lies like snow. Beatrice, to her eternal credit, screamed, Not the printing plates, they're expensive. Anne seized the lever and slammed it upward, locking the machine. It's over, she shouted. Clara froze, eyes wild. You can't silence me. Anne stepped closer, her voice low but cutting. I don't want to silence you. I want you to listen. Clara's breath trembled. You think truth belongs to you, Anne said. It doesn't belong to anyone. It lives through whoever has the courage to face it, and the grace to let others speak. For a moment, the air held. The presses were silent. The room a cathedral again. Then Clara's shoulders sagged. You don't understand what it's like to be invisible. Anne's voice softened. Yes, I do. That broke her. The pistol lay forgotten. The fight went out of her. Evelyn stepped forward and gently took Clara's hand. You can start again. So did I. Clara looked between them, three women, each scarred differently by silence, and finally nodded. Beatrice sniffled, dabbing her eyes. Marvelous. Forgiveness and female solidarity. The ton will hate this ending. Josh smiled faintly. Then we'll write it anyway. Later, as the morning sun bled through the newsroom windows, Anne stood before the press. She placed her open notebook atop the machine. One final edition, she said. The headline read, The Duchess of Westmere. The story is ours to write. She looked at Evelyn, at Josh, at Beatrice, and even at Clara, now sitting quietly in the corner, watching ink dry. London loves stories, Anne said softly. Let them remember this one. Not as scandal, but as proof that even in the ruins, truth can grow. Evelyn smiled. You've done it. Josh took her hand. We've done it. Beatrice sighed dramatically. And I've aged 10 years. Someone fetch me champagne. They all laughed. The kind of laugh that comes only after surviving both heartbreak and history. Outside, the first new papers rolled off the press, ink still fresh, the Duchess's name gleaming under the headline she had chosen. She watched through the window as a boy grabbed one copy and ran into the street shouting, The Duchess speaks again. Anne smiled, closing her notebook for good. Not speaks, she whispered. Lives. Weeks later, in a quiet London cafe, a young woman sat reading the Duchess's printed confession with tears in her eyes. When she finished, she turned the page and wrote her own letter. To the woman who taught us not to whisper. Thank you. Because that's what Anne had always wanted. Not to be remembered as perfect, but as proof that a voice, once silenced, can echo loud enough to change the world. The end.